Hello, my name is David Crocker, and today we're going to be looking at The Price of Freedom, a philosophical analysis of honor and freedom within the Final Fantasy VII franchise. Now, to get us started off, what are we looking at? The research question today is, how does the Final Fantasy VII franchise depict the philosophical ideas of honor and freedom? And also, are they actually culturally accurate to their culture and worldwide culture as a whole? To be covering exactly what we're going to cover, we're going to be starting with the research question, then following the context and impact of both honor and freedom, looking at what Final Fantasy VII actually is as a franchise, how it depicts these values, and whether or not they are culturally accurate. Then we will wrap up with our conclusion as well as the impact they have within society. So, getting the ball continually rolling with context and impact. So, what are exactly honor and freedom? They're very, very wishy-washy with both of the terms, and I want to preface this by saying these are both subjective terms. They're philosophical terms, which means they're both, no matter how you look at them, they're going to be subjective in some sense. But that won't stop us from being able to look at them in a dynamic way. Starting with freedom, it's perennial for many reasons. Obviously, if you're in any kind of nation in today's world, you'll know that freedom is a major talking point. But it isn't just today that's happened. Thomas Hobbes, who was around during the founding of America, argued that freedom should be given, but it can also be taken. And in fact, it is a cost of government, and government is required for humanity to continue functioning without anarchy. Now, that is a bit of an extreme view, but it doesn't come without actual basis. A more modern study found that a lot of Eastern Asian cultures believed in autonomy with responsibility. Once again, having that small caveat, but having a lot more leeway than Hobbes' idea does. Similarly with honor, we're going to look at Western and Eastern Asian cultures, and honestly, these are some of the most strong senses of honor. So they are going to be similar to Hobbes, a little extreme, but they are actually a lot more sensible in a way. For example, the Bushido code of honor for samurai, not just this myth or legend of samurai, the true, real samurai who lived. This existed for them to follow. 7 virtues, which we will look at later, that they are to follow to be considered this more noble and morally correct standpoint. These soldiers who truly are honorable. So, honor itself is connected to morality by that sense, right? While modern study done showed that egalitarian attitudes are also very connected with honor. Egalitarian is essentially the idea that everybody is equal. Everybody deserves an equal chance, equal rights. It's a very humanitarian approach. So it can be easily considered that honor is, in a sense, equality, selflessness, the belief in fighting for others. Now, going back to the whole subjective issue, this is where the modern term honor comes into a little bit of a flaky territory. You see, if you've been to a high school or a college, you'll have undoubtedly heard of the National Honor Society, or an honors college, or a science honor society. And those have a lot of caveats with them. Honor, as we talked about, is a more moral thing. It's a more egalitarian attitude. It is a noble thing. So these schools and these colleges use the word honor for societies that more so give some privilege to people who are not necessarily more honorable, but either more fortunate or just smarter in a sense, or have taken the right steps and happen to land themselves in a very fortunate situation, looking at grades and physical performance as opposed to what they do for people, having actual honor. Now, we talked a lot about these two themes, but what exactly is our next topic? What is Final Fantasy VII? Final Fantasy VII. Now, what is it? Quite simply, what is it? I guarantee that there are tons upon tons of people who have heard the name Final Fantasy, but don't know the difference between any of them. There are at least 14 in the series right now, and it's really hard to keep up between all of them. Well, Final Fantasy VII is by far the most popular Final Fantasy game in the entire series. It is a JRPG, or a Japanese role-playing game, created by game developers Square, as they were known as in 1997, as their Final Fantasy series. Now, while this does have a big old 7 at the end of the name, it should be very clear that it is not required to look at the past games to even look at this game. This is a standalone piece of art. This became a huge worldwide success due to two main things: its technical achievements, being one of the first fully 3D rendered multi-disc huge expansive game in the entire world. It's actually kind of considered to be the world's first AAA game, for better or for worse. But most of all, it really stood out amongst everything gaming was at the time because of its narrative achievements. This took really difficult themes, and it really wouldn't look like much. As you can see in the center picture there, you can look at each and every one of these characters and develop an immediate notion of who they are. You can get an idea. You can tell. Every single thing you can imagine about these characters is almost guaranteed wrong. It is a complete subversion of what you might think, and this drew a lot of people in. It shocked a lot of people, and for very good reason. Everything you could believe about these characters is wrong, and suddenly you're being opened up in this weird way that you may not be comfortable with, being so vulnerable with these characters, being represented through these characters. And that really inspired and also frightened some people. But above all, it sparked the creation of many prequels, crossovers, and even a sequel movie after this original game came out. But it also even inspired the remake project, which is a complete remaking of the entirety of the original game, built in 3 parts and with roughly 200 to 300 hours of extra content to explore. It should be noted that this is not finished yet. Only 2 out of the 3 games have been created and published, and in my opinion, they are some of the best pieces of gaming I have ever experienced. So I highly recommend anybody to do that. Now, this also created a huge audience of people across the world for JRPGs. Now, for the past, 3 minutes, I've been talking about this game and its franchise, and I could go on for another 3 hours if I really wanted to, but how is this any kind of relevant to honor and freedom? Quite simply, every single one of those characters I mentioned previously has a connotation that's very subversive of who they are, except for one, Zack Fair. This is the exact man you believe he is. He looks like a strong, golden-hearted, unshakable hero who is nothing but pure good, but don't let that fool you. He absolutely is pure good. He is, as a character analysis was done by him online, a Superman character. He fights for the people. He fights for what is right. He is all of the good you can imagine. And this made it perfect for him to be the stand-in symbol, along with that car door-sized sword he's holding, of honor and freedom. Honor, through Zack in the game Crisis Core, is depicted as a virtue. It's this whole, almost holy thing. It's this higher understanding, this higher strength, higher power in a sense. At the same time, it's constantly referred to as a burden. This is a strong moral thing. This is an ideal. This is a very impactful experience. However, it's just not easy. It takes a toll on him. It takes a toll on his mentors, both of them. Everyone he comes into contact to wavers at some point, but he maintains this. Now, freedom is very similar in some regard. In the game, it's depicted as the full choice of one's life and actions, so that full autonomy we saw previously is probably pretty similar to this. Now, it's also coming with a big caveat, much like honor. Freedom requires sacrifice. Throughout all of the game, Zack is required to make either a physical or an emotional sacrifice for either his or someone else's freedom. And, as his honor would suggest, he gives it willingly. No doubts. Absolutely none. Now, this is symbolized through one small, very subtle thing: the background score, The Price of Freedom, by Yoshimoto, during his final moments. I won't spoil anything because I highly recommend everybody take a look at it, but it's infamously known as one of the most heartbreaking events in the entirety of gaming. Now, how accurate is this culturally? Surprisingly, extremely accurate. As we talked about before, the Bushido code for samurai had all these virtues, honor and loyalty and courage being three of them, all three depicted within Zack Fair. And you can easily make arguments that politeness and right action are also within Zack Fair, as well as truthfulness and benevolence. He quite literally is the model honorable man. Now, freedom is very similar, once again. This in the game is supported by the idea of the personal autonomy that we mentioned a couple times previously. This really resembles with the research that's been done in modern and slightly less modern, more classical periods. It also correlates with the notion of sacrifice and responsibility that comes with it, represented through the more extreme version with Hobbes's philosophy and the more modern understandings through the recent studies done in Eastern Asia. To conclude this, honor and freedom are both very perennial issues, especially freedom in today's age. Both are personal and very political. But artistic creations such as Final Fantasy VII and the entire franchise have made bold and honestly quite subtle contributions as well to the larger conversation as a whole. On top of that, the franchise has been very, very loyal to the culture that the themes are based on, to everything that it draws from. It has been very, very consistent, very clear, and in a sense, very honorable. So, what does all this really mean? If you ask me, it makes things a little bit clearer. It makes things a bit more understandable. It really hits home the idea that yes, you should be honorable, but it's okay if sometimes you aren't. Yes, you deserve freedom, but there's a cost. Something will have to be given. So ask yourself, what do you believe is the price of freedom?